Hey peeps! So today in the Working With series, we are going to be talking about working with the Oracle of the Shapeshifters. This is probably going to be a long video. It might even end up being recorded in a few parts because this deck is one that especially, I would say about when the deck first came out, so I believe that's like around 6 years ago, this deck was really important for me in coming to know and connect with Oracle decks at a new level. I had a really deeply intense spiritual experience and connection with this deck. In fact, I even did a series for a time called the Oraculum Spectacular that involved working with individual cards in the deck and my experiences with those images and feelings working with the deck. And I will include the link to that playlist below, and I may even here or there offer a few videos on that in the future, because reconnecting with this deck as far as the guidebook, etc., in order to do this video has really inspired me in a lot of ways. So I would like to start by saying that if you're struggling working with this deck, I really want to encourage you to shift perhaps the way that you are looking at the animals and the shapeshifters in each card image. And I'm going to speak to that in a moment, because I'm going to kind of do like a go through the guidebook, etc. situation like I typically do. But what I found in conversations with various people over the years is that sometimes it can feel difficult to connect with this deck if you're expecting traditional animal imagery and also traditional spirit or totem animal guidebook meanings. You will receive a piece of that in this deck, but it's not the main focus of the deck, and I do think it's really important to talk about that, especially if you're feeling disconnected from the deck itself. Okay, so let's start by talking about the deck itself. It's a traditional Blue Angel deck size. For a reference point, here is the Star Child Akashic Records Akashic Tarot for reference to the size. It's a large size deck, which is my favorite, especially for an Oracle deck. The American version has this, I'm so sorry to say this because I love Jasmine and I love her artwork. I can't stand this deck backing. It's one of my least favorite deck backings ever, but this is the deck backing. If you're drawn to it, then you will adore it. The Australian version had a gorgeous one with the owlin image and this really like pretty indigo blue color. I used to have that in the experience of my divorce and moving, etc. I ended up losing that deck, but someday again I'll have that again. But this is the American standardized edition of the Oracle of the Shapeshifters. I should preface this by saying Lucy Cavendish wrote the guidebook and created the deck, and Jasmine Beckett Griffith offered the imagery, the paintings for the card images. You'll see so far in the series we've had a lot of Jasmine and Lucy decks. It's interesting because if you can take the time to connect with her decks, there's a depth to be experienced with these decks that you don't often find, but you do have to take the time. And I would also offer you have to be able to find the way into her artwork, into Jasmine's artwork, in order to have like the most expansive experience working with the deck itself. That requires time. You guys are going to find in this series, and always, I'm going to be talking about journeying with your cards. It's really, in a lot of ways, that simple. You cannot buy a deck and typically immediately feel a connection. You have to spend time with the deck. You have to kind of carry it around and take it places with you, and reference it at various points in your day and through various feelings and emotions and experiences, and do card spreads with it and journal with it. Those are the ways that you really connect with the deck. And so if you're really struggling, and you all, those of you who watched the video for September, heard me say that I have 2 decks on my list that I am working with, reconnecting, like trying to find a way to connect with them, and that involves actually spending time with them. And so no different with this deck. The first thing I'm going to say to you, if you're struggling to connect with the deck, is hang out with it. hang out with it, please, because what's going to happen is you're going to develop your own relationship and nuanced meanings with each card if you spend time with it. And that has been my experience with this deck. I have a really soft place in my heart for this deck. I don't use it constantly anymore the way I did, say, 6 years ago, but I use it quite often, and I use it a lot of times in client readings. It's a very effective clarifier. So I want to encourage you to, if you're struggling, give this deck a chance, and I'm going to talk about why in a couple minutes. So you're going to notice that you have a pretty solid size guidebook. I really want to encourage you, especially with this deck, to avail yourself of the guidebook. Read it through. With Lucy's decks, I always do a sit-down read-through of her guidebook, and then I'll do my daily draws after that and experience each card one-on-one, referencing the guidebook as well as my intuition and my daily draws. So I really encourage you to sit down and give a good read to it. Lucy has these really beautiful insights, and she takes, in my opinion, she takes her decks very seriously. And so each card has been chosen very specifically for a reason, and there's a lot of wealth of wisdom to access within that. So you will see she has quite a lengthy introduction, and then you'll see that there is about the card, which talks about the card itself. Then the card speaks to you. Ooh, I'm still so confused about the screen thing. A wolf moon speaks, so then the card is speaking to you. And then there is the divination piece. I do not believe that she uses reversals in this deck. No, she does not. So each of those paragraphs are different, and this can be a little conflicting in the Lucy decks. You saw me talk about that in the Alice the Wonderland Oracle. In this case, especially when you're getting to know the deck, and if you're struggling to find the deck's voice for you, I would really encourage you to spend time reading those 3 paragraphs. But most important at the end of the day is the divination piece if you don't have time to get into the card meaning itself. I want to share a little bit about the deck itself from the beginning, because the beginning intro of the guidebook, because I do think that that's important. We are not, again, with this deck, talking about accessing straight up just traditional spirit animal and totem animal meanings. We are looking at shapeshifters. So it's a little bit different, but it still does include traditional symbolism. So there's another layer here, and this is the shape-shifting piece. Now with that comes the understanding that we are talking about change. We're talking about merging with an energy, which would be the shapeshifter that's depicted on the image, and experiencing a different aspect of ourself and change through that. And there's a quote from Walt Whitman here that I think might help you if you're struggling with this deck to understand, and it's in the guidebook. So you can, this is not from me, you could totally reference this. Lucy included this. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. So it's about looking at things from a different perspective and looking at and accessing a different piece of ourself that we may not give space to in our lives. So that's very important. And then farther on in the paragraph, she says, you have a myriad of possible selves within you, and you can bring any of them to life should you choose. Will you deny your soul its forms? So we're looking at that in this deck. We're looking at the shape-shifting aspect, this putting on of another skin, exploring a different aspect of ourselves, and connecting with an energy to understand a situation or ourselves in a new way. And so we are talking about magical familiars here. We're talking about not just like wolf and bear, but dragon and all kinds of other magical beings, as well as animals that we see in the spirit world. Okay, so each creature has a definite unique energy. As each magic animal steps forward to speak with you, over time their voices will merge with those of your own soul, so their wisdom will always be with you as sure as sunrise and sunset. We are at the edge of a great ending. To leave the old world and reach the new, we need our guides to help us navigate the void. We change and we change again. We fear change, yet it comes. Change is. Life is full of cycles and natural systems. The insight of these shapeshifters and familiars, the skin turners and wear ones, will help you see, experience, and interact with your own metamorphosis. For we are all in the process of transition, of dying to one world, one self, one life, and rebirthing to the next. The shapeshifters within this deck are midwives, elders, guides, seers, teachers of wisdom, and great masters. They are spirit allies who will stand with you in times of trouble. They are familiars who will gladly share their power. They are shapeshifters who can teach you about adaptation and show you possibilities for yourself that you may never even have considered. So we are really talking about not just spirit animals, which is where I think perhaps some of us get stuck with this deck, but we're really going into the more magical layer of this work. So let's look at a few of the images so that you can get an idea of what you are looking at. This is an older Jasmine deck, so it does feature more of her older artwork than her newer style. Okay, so you can see you get the keyword like mermaid in a koi pond, and then you get a phrase, rediscover your individuality, become the dragon. So in the Australian edition, there are some different images chosen. I believe the fairy bee is different in the Australian because it was published before this one. This is the fairy bee, my life is sweet. Wolf moon, I will watch over you. You can see you typically have a girl and then the spirit animal or animals that are showing up that are working with her and that are working with you. This deck does not only look at the light, it looks at the dark as well. So some of the card meanings are for difficult or painful things. And I really, sorry about that, would encourage you to not run away from those more difficult or more visceral meanings, and instead lean into them and let yourself find the wisdom in them. The cardstock is typical, you know, it's a typical cardstock. There's nothing great to write home with about this. Let's see. There's one that may help. It's a big deck. Let me tell you how many. There are 45 cards, so it's a good sized deck. It comes in that nice little tuck box. Let's just see. This one. This is one of my favorite images because it's Pell. So there's that. You know, you've got little Red Riding Hood in here, a loyal guardian, a twist in the tail. Jasmine loves ferrets, so you will see those interspersed throughout the deck. All right, so let's talk now about ways that we can connect effectively with Oracle of the Shapeshifters. So I'm going to come back to a lot of times the same tenets for, you know, every deck, because it's the same way. We have to spend time with the deck in order to really get to know it. If we want to be able to, for most decks, if we really want to have an experience, we have to hang out with the deck. So you want to do path working with this deck. You know, you might like set a little challenge for yourself for a couple weeks that you're going to make sure that you set time aside to path work with one card from the deck every night and journal about that and look at what came up for you in connecting one-on-one with the card image in order to connect more deeply with your intuition and how it relates to the deck. The other way that I'm always going to encourage you to connect with the deck is by daily draws and then journaling about intuitively what you experience when you look at an image and then what the guidebook has to say to you. Remember that I did recommend with this deck that you do reference the guidebook meanings, especially when you're starting out with this deck. So this isn't a deck that I would like rush into doing readings for others with until you spend a little time with the guidebook and get to know how Lucy has set up the structure of the deck and what the voices of each card is in general saying. Okay, so outside of that, let's look at how we can connect with understanding what the card itself is trying to tell us. So we're going to look at Dragonling Garden for this. Dragonling Garden for this. Excuse me. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a little bit stuffy today. So the first thing that we want to notice and pay attention to in Lucy and Jasmine's decks are the keywords underneath the title, which is A New World is Born. So this really lets us know that the card is talking about something new happening. We could talk about the World and the Fool in tarot with this image. It's like there's new growth to be experienced here. Something new is happening. We can view something with fresh eyes. We can allow something to be a different experience than perhaps we've chosen to have before when this card shows up. And then we can take a look at, because this is Oracle of the Shapeshifters and we're working with the animal energy associated with each card, we can also look at the animals that are included in the image. So here we have deer, which is very much about family and home and connection to our role in society and in community. What is that? How are we exploring that? We have the cardinal, which represents death and messages from the other side. We have chipmunk. We have frog, which is about new home, fresh energy coming in. Chipmunk is like that preparative energy. And then we have rabbit, which is of course fertility, growth. There's a bluebird as well. And then we have the dragonling itself. And the dragonling is that connection to the elemental and the experience of a new world coming from that. We also have this beautiful night sky, the cosmos there, this connection to our infinite self, to our divine self. And we see all around her this very green energy of growth and change. It's about something new. So by spending a little time with the image, you can connect into the symbolism that the artist and the deck creator have been encouraging us to explore. And you can also connect with the animal energy of each animal. And then, of course, going to your guidebook and looking at journal prompts that Lucy's given you and guidebook meanings there as well can really help you to feel connected to the imagery in this deck. The most important thing that I would offer with this deck is connecting with the cards one-on-one allows you to really feel the message of the deck itself, so that when it comes time to start working with spreads, and you can work with spreads in tandem to doing all of these things. It's not like you have to do all of these things in a linear fashion before you can connect with working with the deck, especially if you're reading for yourself. I mean, I think in that case, and doing things like spreads, etc., can be really helpful. But you want to approach this deck with a curiosity and remembering that it is encouraging you to look at a change in perspective, a new way of experiencing or doing something, and being fully open to that exploration and the message that might be coming in for you. So we're going to reference one more image. Deep Dark Sea Mermaid, finding solutions in the unknown places in the darkness. So, same thing here. We want to pay attention to, first of all, the feel of the image itself. It's very blue and like opalescent silver. There's this feeling of mystery, intrigue, not knowing for sure exactly what's going on. An exploration is happening here. And we also know that we're talking about shadow because darkness is coming up too. So where does the shadow give us contrast to the light? I'll go back to what I always say to you guys, like, what's the sweet within the sting here? Excuse me. There's a real encouragement with this image to look at something that feels ugly and explore the beauty inside of it. And that includes aspects of ourselves as well as perhaps other people or situations in our lives. And I think the fish that we see represented here really, really illustrates that beautifully, because there's such a fierceness and a kind of harshness to the fish, and then we have this light, this luminous quality that's coming up through the whatever that is for the fish. Like, it's not its fin, but whatever the technical term is there for that. So there's an encouragement to look at the light and the beauty even in something that seems ugly or harsh or frightening or scary. And there's also this ability to recognize within the mermaid too what her lessons are. Why is she down there in the dark? Is she forced to stay there, or is this a place that she visits that feels good for her, that allows her to feel connected? This is a way that we get to know the deck by exploring the images, marrying that to the meaning, and then allowing our intuition to give us the language for what the card itself is telling us. A lot of it does come back to trusting our intuition. And there's a real beauty to connecting with this deck in this way. So I'm going to do a sample reading for us, as I've been doing lately. I'm not going to stop this video because I don't feel like editing it, to be honest with you. So we're going to do a past, present, future read from this deck. Let's see, can we get all that in there? Okay. So when we look at the past card, we have Miss Spiderweb, card number 14. Reconsider your alliances, make new connections. There is perhaps a pause we can take at this time, and I'm finishing this recording on the 13th. We're approaching the new moon. I'm not the new moon. We're approaching the full moon, which actually happens at midnight on the 14th. Even though we're all loving to say it's on the 13th, for most of us it's happening stateside. It's happening on the 14th at midnight. Interesting that this is card number 14. So we're kind of being encouraged to take a pause, and in regards to our past, look at choices that we made, connections that we chose to keep fostering, even though perhaps maybe a friendship or a relationship was toxic. You know, in what way did that hold us back? What lessons did we learn there? And when we found the strength to step away from that relationship or friendship, what did we discover? What was the sweet there that we discovered? The sweet that is our present, because the fairy bee shows up to let us know that your life is sweet. So in the present, in this moment, as we step into the energy of honoring the full moon, the aspect of the full moon, especially being in Pisces, can we find and experience and explore the beauty of our current relationships and partnerships based on the healthy choices that we've decided to make from realizing where the toxicity was in our life. Now we can be in this place where instead of feeling like we're wounded forever or there's pain forever, we'll never be healed from those past relationships. We can instead see where our growth is and our strength is, and how much we have learned, and the beauty that comes from learning those lessons, and the strengthening of the connections that exist for us that are healthy at this time. And then we go into the Mermaid of Immersion, Complete Commitment, card number 44, as our future. So we can see that from this space, this reevaluation, this understanding of the lessons of releasing toxic relationships, comes the beauty of this very moment in our life, who we are now, what we've discovered and learned about ourselves and others through this, and the beauty of the relationships we have currently. And then in the future, we can step into perhaps a committed partnership, a new committed partnership, or a friendship that feels deeply fulfilling, that might be with a soulmate, just not in a romantic partnership. There's all of these possibilities that come for healthy relationship in the future based on finding our strength in making healthy choices, of ending toxic relationships, and then experiencing now the sweet of discovering ourselves again and healthy connections and relationships, which lead to powerful experience of new relationships in the future to come. So this is a way that we can read with the Oracle of the Shapeshifters. So you can see that we paid attention to, yes, absolutely, the card meanings, the keywords that are listed at the bottom of the card, the numbers of the cards, but also we're paying attention to, you know, the shapeshifters that are represented in the image itself and the feel of the cards themselves as well in relation to our past, present, future energy for the full moon from the 13th to the 14th of 2019, September. So there's, this deck just reads so beautifully. It's so worth connecting with this deck, even if you struggle to experience that connection right away. I would really encourage you to work with it for a little bit of time, because it's one of those decks that just has been such a blessing in my life and reads so just like a song for me now. And I feel really connected to the images in the deck and the meanings of the deck, and it was created with beautiful intention as well, so it's a joy to work with it from that perspective too. So as always, I am sending you all much love and many blessings, wishing you all a blessed full moon, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.